Okay, so next we have Elliot Dennis. He is with the Nebraska UNO Ag Econ Department, and he graciously helped me fill in again, kind of at the last minute here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Elliot.
Yeah, thanks, Brandy, for having me. And sorry I couldn't be in person. Unfortunately, schedules were such that it wasn't going to be that I could finish all my obligations here in Lincoln and get down to Clay Center in time. But hope you've been having a good time and that the food has been good. I'm told Brandy that I would be more than happy to talk about risk management. And given the timing of where we're on the production season, I think it might actually be a useful topic to also to touch base on. And specifically, when we think about profitability, this is some of the ways that I like to kind of think about it. Oftentimes when we think about managing profitability, we often think about here on the left-hand side, right? Just nice and easy, pushing cows forward. And it's just like, where do I bring them to market so I can cash in? And then we have kind of like with the government, you know, some of their policies and some of the commentary we get from some of the state and federal legislators. They kind of think that we're just kind of rolling in profits, and so much that we might as well just start feeding all the cash that we have to our animals. But when we actually come down to it, executing a price risk management strategy, volatile markets, it can often feel like a steer wrestle. And so today we're going to talk about a few tools that will hopefully reduce some of that anxiety that you might have about output price, and hopefully provide some directions for you to go into the production year with some tools to help kind of ensure greater success. So when we talk about net profit, this is a typical profit equation, but it's simplified, and we have to really ask ourselves the question, what type of risk do we want to manage? There's lots of different types of risks that we can manage. And so we have to know what's important to us, what gives us the most stress, so that we can take corrective action and basically transfer that risk to someone else and pay them to manage that risk for us. That we do that transfer in the form of risk management tools. Specifically, what we're going to focus on today is this this bracket A, output price. So if we take total pounds of production times our output price, this gives our operational gross revenue. And so we're going to talk about what are some ways that we can prevent output price from falling. It's important to note that these tools should be used in the right context. We have a toolbox, like if we're building a shed, we have a toolbox of lots of things that we can use. We have hammers, we have saws, we have drills. Each one of them serves a certain purpose. And so if we, if we're gonna measure out and cut a piece of board, we're not gonna grab the hammer because that's not the right tool for that action that we're trying to take. And the same thing can be said of price risk management tools. Each one of these tools works effectively in a certain scenario, certain market situation. And so this is what kind of, this flow diagram gives you an idea of what tool to use given certain market scenarios. So the way that we can look at this is if you're sitting in one of these market presentations, or you're listening to the ag radio and they start talking about the markets, you just flow through this diagram. What's the person saying? Are they saying that we're pretty certain about price? And are they saying that prices are likely to remain steady to higher? Well, what that signals to you is that the appropriate price risk management strategy is just to stay in the cash market. But if they start saying, we're pretty certain that the market's going to go lower, some of the times they might use bearish, then the question you have to ask is, what is basis going to do? And basis is the difference between the cash price and the futures price that's traded at CME. There's historical basis patterns that are available. We provide them here at UNL Ag Econ Department, or if you want to talk to your county agent and work through that, they can get those to you as well. But we have to have some expectation. Is basis going to be higher than what we've historically observed, or is it going to be lower? Basis can go higher or lower regardless of the market situations. Basis can be trending or getting higher, or what we call wider. If in an increasing market, it can also do it in a decreasing market. So if it's going to go higher, that it's going to be stronger than it was before. The best strategy is to sell futures or buy LRP. So this is where we're going to focus on today. We're going to be talking about situations where we're pretty certain that price is going to go lower and that basis is expected to be higher, or a situation where price outlook is uncertain, but volatility is pretty low, which is buy LRP. So those are the two market situations that we're going to be talking about. And so before we talk about that, when we go through LRP, we're going to talk about 4 things. We're going to talk about when we should use it, as we just did, what it can do, what it can't do, and some potential hazards in using this type of tool. So it's important that we understand what it can do, what it cannot do, to recognize what risks we're actually transferring, what risks are we taking on. And then also recognizing that every tool that we use comes with potential risks. And so we have to be aware of what those risks are so that when situations happen, we know how to correctly respond. So LRP has been offered since 2003. This was first authorized by the USDA to be sold by crop insurance agents. And so you can buy LRP, livestock risk protection, through any certified crop insurance agent who has also taken continuing education courses to sell LRP. So what you'll notice is that prior to 2020, there really wasn't a huge use of LRP. And part of that had to do with the subsidy level. From 2013 to 2018, subsidy levels, or what the government was willing to pay a portion of your premium, was about 13%. In 18 and 19 and 20, the federal government took actions to increase the subsidy levels. And essentially the higher level subsidy level went from 13% all the way to about 35%. And so that's really why we're seeing this big jump in the use of LRP, especially for swine and for feeder cattle have been the 2 largest users, but it's largely a function of that subsidy level. So LRP is known as an output price insurance because essentially what it does is it sets a floor. So we have this price, we say we don't want it to go below that. So we say, I want it to be guaranteed that price. In order to be guaranteed that price, I have to pay someone a premium. And they essentially guarantee or say that if prices go below that, you'll be paid out a certain level. So for particular in feeder cattle, there's 2 different types of weights that you have to know. When I sell the animals, let's say in October, they're going to be weighing 550 pounds or however heavy they're going to weigh. And that's where we get the feeder cattle weight 1 and feeder cattle weight 2. This kind of gives you, so you have to estimate the weight of the cattle at the time of sale. And then we already know you have to say, are they steers, heifers, Brahman, or dairy cattle? And we go to this website, USDA RMA Livestock Tools, and essentially what it does is it provides, we can select the date, the location, the feeder cattle, and the steer weight too, and it will create a report. I want to show you what that looks like, if possible. And I went ahead and just showed these rates. Can you guys see this, Brandy? Showing the RMA coverage price.
Yeah, it's very small.
Okay. See if I can zoom in here a little bit for you. This is what the coverage price would look like. So if you go to that website that I showed you, and you type in Nebraska feeder cattle steer weight 2, it will provide this rates table. And it's very, very, long, but let's just walk through what this rate table is telling us. So we have this endorsement length. This is from today, 13 weeks in the future. That's when that coverage will be on for. So we can go here on the right side and see this end date. It will say 04/22/2022. That's when the coverage will end, and we can either choose to sell the cattle in the cash market, or we can choose to retain them and continue to feed them for longer periods of time. And even if we want, we can put more coverage or new coverage back on the animals. This is for Friday's prices, and this is what the feeder cattle futures market was trading at, 167. And so we have to ensure a percentage of this feeder cattle futures price. That's what this coverage price is. This is the price that you ultimately choose. And what this is saying here on the coverage level is that it's 99% of this expected value. So this price, 167.78, was 99% of this expected value. And in order to get that, the unsubsidized premium is $5.50 per hundredweight. But because of that subsidy that we were talking about, where the government pays a certain percent, the producer will only have to pay $3.50 per hundredweight in order to take out that coverage. What that means is once April 22nd comes around, if the national price is lower than 167.78, we will receive the difference between what the price was and this coverage price multiplied by the number of pounds insured. And so you can really go down here and you can choose different coverage levels. Let's say maybe we're going down here. This is for 13 weeks. This is the coverage price. Maybe our cost of production is 150. And really all we're concerned about is making sure that I am profitable into the future. I just need to make sure I'm covering my costs of production. Let's say I've worked with people in my community and penciled it out, and I figured out, wow, my cost of production, cost of gain is $1.50. So I can take out and say I want to just ensure that I'm going to cover all my costs, and I'm willing to pay 30 cents per hundredweight to ensure that I can cover all my costs. So there's different ways you can use this and different strategies. But once again, go to USDA RMA and you'll put in all this information, and then you'll create this report right here. Let me go back now to the PowerPoint. So what I want you to do now that we've kind of gone and worked through that example and what this would look like, here is, I took a random year from the past 7 years and said, okay, here was the rates that were offered at certain times. And what is, these are the expected coverage prices. This is the coverage level. This is how much it costs. What I want you to do now, if you can see that, is pick one of those lines or none of them and decide, okay, this is the coverage level that I want to take out on my feeder cattle. So I'll give you about 15-20 seconds. Look through these rates and decide if you would want to take out coverage, and if so, at what level. Oh, it's too small. Okay. Well, we'll go through here at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's walk through an example of what this payout would look like, right? So let's say we have 66 head of feeder cattle and we're expecting them to weigh about 750 pounds. We go through that list and we say, okay, here's, we pick out a coverage level price of 140. And with that, it's associated a $5 premium per hundredweight, right? So we take out this endorsement period or this coverage, and we wait throughout the endorsement period. At the end, it actually is, the prices fall and the actual ending value is $120 per hundredweight. So the question is, how much money do I have to pay in the premium? How much do I get back from my crop insurance agent? And how does this affect overall operation revenue? Okay. So I went ahead and just put out the calculations here for you. We have 66 head. We're insured, and those cattle are estimated to be 750 pounds. So in total, we have about 50,000 pounds of production. We were insuring at the 140 level, but prices ended up being 120. And so we should be compensated $20 per hundredweight. So what is the indemnity, or what's the payback from the crop insurance agent? We take that 400, or basically 50,000 pounds times, or 495 hundredweight multiplied by the $20 per hundredweight, and we get an net indemnity of about $10,000. So that's the effect of the insurance working. Then what we do is we take that net payment, right? Because we have to pay for that coverage now. And we take how many pounds we were insuring, 495 hundredweight, and times the $5 per hundredweight. And the net thing, that check that will be written out to us from our crop insurance agent, will be $7,405. So that's the that money is meant to offset any loss of or the decrease in the national price. But we still have the animals, right? So we have a decision to make. We can sell the animals in the cash market at 120, or we can continue to feed them and sell them at a later time. In this case, I've just said, let's just sell them in the cash market for 120. So 495 times 120 plus that indemnity gives us $66,805. And so really what this does is, you still have the physical animals. All it's doing is paying you, saying if the market falls, that you have the ability to recoup some of those costs. So that's here on the left-hand side. This is what happens if we do receive a payout. But there could be years when we we put that coverage in and prices actually improve, right? That's definitely possible. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But what that ends up resulting in is we don't get a payout, and we actually have to pay about $2,500 in the premium, and that just gets deducted from our total revenue that we received. But like I said, that's not a bad thing, because we have the profits and markets improved, and that's great. When you buy a house, we take out insurance, and so that if our house burns down, that we can have the money to rebuild our home, right? But we're not necessarily wanting our house to burn down every year just so that we can get an indemnity payment. We want to live in our home, and if something catastrophic happens, we want to be able to rebuild it. And so we can think of LRP in a similar way. It's not exactly the same, but it's a similar concept, that we don't necessarily want to receive an indemnity every year, because what that means is the markets are performing much worse than what we expected. And so if we're paying out premiums, it's okay. What isn't, where it kind of goes wrong sometimes, is if we pay out the indemnities we pay out the premiums, and then all of a sudden one year or a couple years we say, I'm sick of paying these, and we end up removing that price risk protection. And as luck would have it, generally during that time, a market shock happens, and when we needed it, we didn't have it in place. So where are these policies actually sold? Nebraska is actually the largest user of LRP. And so I say that with a little bit of reservation, because prior to 2020, there wasn't a lot of use, but even with the added use, Nebraska still consists of about 15 to 20% of all LRP policies sold throughout the United States. And really what we're concerned about is that the performance of this insurance products benefits producers. And the ways that we calculate that insurance is through this ratio called the loss ratio. And down here on the bottom, you can see that the loss ratio is simply indemnities divided by premiums. So indemnities are the total amount that the insurance company pays out, in this case, USDA RMA. And premiums are the premiums that we end up paying to the government to provide that risk protection. And so we want it to be approximately 1. That would be a fair insurance product. If it's over 1, what that means is that we receive more indemnity or more money back than we actually paid in. If it's less than 1, what that means is it's actually hurting the producer, and so we wouldn't want to use that. From 2003 to 2002, feeder cattle LRP was about 0.75. This is unsubsidized. So what that meant is for every dollar that the producer paid in, they only got back 75 cents in indemnity. So what we started to see is that the use of LRP went down, right? Irrational people are saying, I'm paying for this coverage and I'm not getting it back. And with the subsidy levels that have now been increased, that loss ratio, if we were to go back and adjust it for all those years, it would be somewhere in the range of 1.2. And so it's actually more beneficial for the producer now to put that coverage in. But as I mentioned, this is a long-term loss ratio. As you can see from this graph on the right, this loss ratio varies year to year. So it's not consistent, but over time, it's saying if you stick to a certain strategy over time, it's going to pay back with a new subsidy about $1.2 to every dollar that's put in. So let's talk about how these are priced, right? So when you go in, one of those features that I showed you was that there's going to be some sort of producer premium that's paid. And the way that this function is that it's what we call an at the money or out of the money put. And essentially what that means is the price of LRP everything is tied to the amount of time that's left from when I take out the coverage to when the contract expires. And so that's exactly what this graph is saying. This 99 all the way to 86, what that's saying is this is the percent of the coverage price that we're covering. So, right, if we cover less of it, we pay less premium, right? We're covering less of that coverage price. And the different color lines, what that represents is the amount of time left. Right? So if we were to get an October contract, we're going to pay less than if we got a March contract. And this is for numbers that I put together back in July. What that's basically saying is that because March is farther away than October, there's more time left. We have to pay an additional premium for that. So know that if we want coverage really far in the future, we're going to be paying more for that than if we want short-term coverage. And so just recognize that there's a few decisions that you need to make. You need to decide principally what coverage level you want and what month do you want to put that coverage in, how far in the future. And those are going to be the two primary determinants of of that price on any given day. To show you an example of how LRP and CME really compare, right? If we have two tools and we have LRP and we have CME put options, the real question is, well, which one should I use? Which one's going to be more expensive, or which one's going to do the coverage for me the best? And this is what these graphs are trying to say. If you look on the left-hand side, this is the difference between option premiums between LRP and CME. And without the subsidy, LRP is actually more expensive. And so the government comes in and subsidizes LRP. And even with the old LRP subsidy, it was pretty much equal between managing that price with with CME options or with LRP. And now, in addition, with the new subsidies, it is extremely cost effective. And in some cases, it's about 30 to 40% cheaper to manage risk with LRP versus CME options. And so I think that the government's recognize that cattle prices can be volatile. There's a lot of time between someone makes a production decision, such as, let's say, a breeding decision, and when that animal actually comes to market. And so they recognize that, they want to help producers manage some of that price risk, especially smaller producers, because here with LRP, you can ensure pounds of production and don't have to be confined to CME contracts, which are about 50,000 pounds. So this is a question that I get a lot from people who have kind of made this step between, I have a desire to manage price risk, and I think LRP might be the right tool to be in this situation. The question that I almost always get is, well, what coverage should I use that's maybe gonna, the phrase they use is maximize profit, but return the most benefit to my operation. So this is some work that's been done out of Tennessee. And so this gives you an idea of, given a certain week or endorsement length and a coverage level within that endorsement length, and when the cattle are sold, what is going to return the highest net price given LRP is used? Excuse me. So the X is what that represents, saying that if you, let's say, you're going to sell cattle in January, and you choose an endorsement length of 13 weeks and a coverage price between 97.5% and 100%, January over this 20-year period is going to return the highest net price if you use LRP relative to just staying in the cash market. So that's how you can use this, and I'll provide these slides to Brandy, and hopefully she can email them out so you can have this for your records. So you can use this as you start looking at your operation and start thinking, when do I sell cattle? If let's say I sell in November, and I pretty much have 2 windows and 1 coverage level that I should be really concerned about, either the 17-week at this high level of coverage, that's where that X is, or maybe 13 weeks at still the high level of coverage. And so this, as I mentioned, this is long-term averages. So this is, if you have this coverage in for, in this case, 20 years, it would have paid out the most during these 20 years. And so, as they always say in this stuff, the past isn't a predictor of future success, but historically, this is what we observed. And hopefully this can provide some use for you and your operation. So now that we've kind of explored some of what LRP is, we talked about, ways to go about getting LRP, the performance of that, how it's priced. The real question is, what happened to those payouts? What happened to those decisions? So unfortunately, you can't see this, but If we were in person or that had these slides beforehand, what we really would have talked through is why did you choose a certain coverage level, and why did you choose a certain endorsement period? And really what that helps us do then is to recognize that internally, we have a desire to manage at least some price risk, and we have certain things that we're not willing to, I don't know, to live with. So an example would be is if someone wants really far coverage, but they choose a low endorsement period or low coverage level, what that would mean is they say, you know what, I just want to be able to make sure I can be ranching in the future. So I just want to set a floor really in the future and just say, I want to make sure my costs of, or all my feed costs are covered. That would be a way to manage price, and that LRP could be useful. Regardless of what those are, I would encourage you to write it down. And I say write it down before the production season really gets underway, because oftentimes we have market situations that present themselves as they do every year, right? And the question is, what should I do and how do I react to those market situations? Well, it can be really easy in that situation to say, I'm just gonna go with the flow, or wow, the markets are really rising and I'm just gonna ride it out. While that can be okay, there's a lot of risks associated with that. And so what I'd encourage you is just develop a strategy that you feel comfortable with, that you understand how to use those tools. Remember, safety first on all this stuff. And then put it down and commit it to writing, so that when the market presents itself in the future, you already have a strategy moving forward to take advantage of those situations. And as with most price risk managements, you're not going to hit the highs of the highs, but you're not going to hit the lows of the lows. And really, that's what we're aiming for. We're going to be offsetting some of that risk. We're going to pay for that. And we accept that we're not going to always be top dollar on everything. But the important thing is that we maintain profitability and that we continue to ranch in the future, so that if we have a desire, we have the ability to pass our operation to the next generation. And with that, here's my information. If you have questions or you want to talk about this more, or you want to see how it'll apply to your own operation, that's part of my job. I work with producers to try to do that. And part of our job at UNL is to provide that unbiased information. So if you want to talk through, should I go with a crop insurance agent that I do my traditional lending with, or maybe I should go with a private company, we can talk through some of those situations and what you're looking for. Feel free to copy down that information, or Brandy can send that out to you. And I guess with that, I'll turn it back to you, Brandy, to kind of facilitate questions, comments, or points of suggestion for me.
Okay, thank you, Elliot. Does anybody have any questions? Pretty quiet group. Go ahead, Brandy. Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Elliot. And we can, I can send those slides out later on. So thanks for being available on short notice.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Brandy, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your guys' day.